Hey, what's going on, guys? Pastor Abe here. Welcome back to another episode of the Rewind podcast. Today is Tuesday. I pray that you guys are having a great start to your week already, that you had a successful Monday, and that Tuesday you're just going full force running ahead. Look, this Sunday was an awesome Sunday. It was a great word from God. I had a great time preaching it, and it was a challenging word. You know, it's one of those Sundays that we don't get a bunch of amens, right? And you know it's good when there's not a bunch of amens happening in the house, because it means that God is really speaking to us. And even afterwards in the lobby, I had a great time talking to a lot of y'all. Came up to me and telling me, you know, Pastor, that word was for me. I'm dealing with some stuff. There's some things in my life that, you know, I've given my life to Christ, and I've been trying to get rid of these things in my life. And I wanted to dive deeper into that based out of the conversations I was having in the lobby, but also I knew after preaching the sermon that, you know, within the 35 to 40 minutes that I don't really have a lot of time to explain everything. And I thank God for the opportunity to get an extra 30, 40 minutes on this platform to be able to dive a little bit deeper. Today, I want to talk about the sermon that we talked about on Sunday, which was Kill What Kills Love. And I messed up at the beginning. I said, on Sunday, I said, kill what kills you. At the end of the day, I mean, if this is killing love, ultimately it is killing you. And we're going to dive into why that is. I preached on how Paul, specifically out of Colossians 3:5-10, talks about how we're supposed to put to death things of the world, put to death things of this earth, things like, malice, lust, sexual immorality, impurity, greed, he says, which is idolatry. He says, put all these things to death. But maybe you're thinking, okay, today's, Tuesday. I already went through Monday. Sermon on Sunday was great. It hit me, directly. But what does it actually look like to put this to death? Like what practically it's Tuesday morning. Maybe, I'm in a moment where temptation's really high, or maybe when emotions are, at their highest, temptation's real. What about when patterns have already been formed over some time? What do you do then? How do you practically kill sin? Well, I want to talk about that today. I'd love to use some examples also from my life. I want to be honest with y'all and share, from my life and things that I've encountered. And also more importantly, what does the Bible say? How do we practically kill sin? I'll tell you something. You don't kill sin by trying harder. Any of you that have tried to do that, that does not work. You do not kill sin by trying harder. You kill sin, ready? Write this down. You kill sin by starving it and replacing it. That's how you kill sin. So most people, they try to kill sin at the moment of temptation. They're already on the app. They're about to click on the link and they're like, okay, God, if it's you, God, give me the power. No, by then it's already strong. So we don't kill sin in the moment. Is it possible? Sure, for sure. And God gives us strength for sure. But if every time you're trying to kill sin, it's in the moment, then, you're going to fail a lot of the time, right? And that's because sin doesn't start with action. Sin starts with something else. Sin starts with appetite. And I want you to look at what James 1 says. It says, each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires. Now, the Greek idea there, or behind dragged away, paints a picture of something or someone that is pulled by something that is already living or alive inside of you. So if you're constantly, feeling this, oh my God, this thing is just pulling me every time I get home, right before I go to bed, I keep falling into sin every time I'm at this party, every time I feel like I'm getting dragged in that direction. Well, this is exactly what James is talking about in James chapter 1. Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by what's living inside of them, by their own evil desires and entices. That's something that's already there. So how do we tackle that? Well, I think we got to be honest with ourselves. Okay, this is the most important part. I hear a lot from people like, Pastor, I'm praying and I don't know why it's not getting easier. Well, prayer works, but you also have to set up some guardrails. You also have to put some action behind that prayer. So think about this for a second. If you're constantly feeding your mind with certain images, you're entertaining constantly certain thoughts, and also if you're constantly surrounding yourself with in certain environments around certain people, then the reality, let's be honest, the reality is that you're not fighting sin. The reality is that you're training it. You're training it. You're training your brain. You're training your sin that okay, if I'm around this environment, if I'm around these people, this happens, and that's okay. It's okay that I constantly watch these kind of movies that eventually lead to this. We have to be honest with ourselves. What are you surrounding yourself with? What are you training? Look, Jesus said this. He said, if your right hand causes you to stumble, he says, cut it off. Now, let's be honest, like, he's not talking here literally, but he is being serious. He's saying basically remove access to certain things, remove triggers, remove pathways, remove the things that constantly keep like leading you in that direction. Now, let me give you some real examples, right? So like if you're struggling with lust, then let's be honest. There's some things that you can do. You can filter your phone. You can change your algorithm. You can stop following certain accounts. There's things that you can do. I remember when I was, single, it's been a minute now, but when I was single, before I was married, because, obviously I would date and then be single. But what I mean, when I say single, I mean like before I was married. I used to follow on Instagram, different like fitness accounts, both, men and women, like just, I was like really into fitness. But at the beginning of like the early 2000 fitness era, it really was like bodybuilding fitness. I still remember that, like, we were coming out of the age of like, the Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And like, it was really, really cool. So I was just fascinated. I would go to all the conventions, like, it was my life. But one thing that I noticed is that, into the past the early 2000s, fitness like started moving away from like actual fitness to more of just like marketing to sell products. And if you know anything about marketing in the US, a lot of times, like in order to sell products are tied to or married to certain images. They're tied to or married to certain personalities that promote certain things. And so one thing that I noticed, I didn't notice it in the moment. I didn't notice it until I was married, was that when I would open my Instagram, a lot of like the pictures that would come up, they weren't about Arnold anymore or Frank Zane or like any of these like bodybuilder guys. A lot of this like gym stuff was very provocative. A lot of this gym stuff was like very revealing. And I think that if you're not careful, that stuff leads and can open a door and lead into a different direction. And so I made a decision. And my wife will tell you, I mean, you can go online, you can go on my social media, go online at Abe Zun on Instagram, and on Facebook. You can go, and what you'll see is that I like unfollowed every single page that had to do with that. Like every single page, anyone that was like posting anything like that, provocative or anything, I just unfollowed them. And then that was like one thing, right? And then I noticed that like as Instagram progressed, one thing that was very like heavily developed into Instagram was this algorithm, because obviously people, what people like, they want to see more of. And so if you like certain things, or not even like if you enjoy them, I mean like if you hit like on something, then the algorithm gets trained, right? And say, okay, this person likes that. And so it begins to feed you a lot of that. So one thing was I deleted or unfollowed a bunch of accounts that, I don't think were bad, but they were just posting a lot of, provocative stuff that I was like, I don't need this on my feed. Well, because I had followed a lot of that for some time, my algorithm, would still show me this stuff, even though I wasn't following those accounts. And so I went into the settings on Instagram. I got my phone, I opened up Instagram, went to the settings, and there was a setting there to clear my algorithm, to like clear my history, clear everything. And I was like, you know what? I want that. I want to start fresh. Now, if you go to my Instagram today, and I've even showed like, I've talked about this stuff with some of the guys at our church and helped them through a lot of this, these same things, these same topics. One of the things that I tell them is like, if you go on there now, it's like a bunch of, my algorithm is like a bunch of clips of like The Chosen, some military stuff. I enjoy military content, so like some military stuff, and a lot of like Stitch, right? A lot of you guys know that my wife and I love like Stitch animated series and Minions. Like that's all like my feed is now, right? It's very, very, quote unquote boring. What some people might say boring, but what I can tell you is like, I have closed certain doors to make sure that things aren't accessing me or have access to me, and I don't have access to them. Very simple things that are intentional. And what we'll see throughout, the conversation here today that I'm having with you is that there's a lot of intentionality behind the change that needs to happen here. So if you're struggling with lust, a big recommendation to y'all, filter your phone. There's certain things that you can remove and delete off of your phone, certain restrictions that you can preset. Again, you have to do this. Like you have to want to do this. So number one, it's like the desire. And then number two is like the action. You have to actually follow through with this. I have a friend, obviously I'm not going to say who, but I have a friend who is very, he's a leader in a church, and he's very open about his like struggle with lust and with pornography. And this is like a friend of mine that is a church leader, right? And like in a pastoral role. And one thing that I know, is that, and by the way, before I continue, I must say like all pastors are human. Okay. So everyone has the things that they struggle with. So maybe you're like, oh my God, he's a pastor and he struggles with that. Yeah. Like everyone has like a past. Everyone has things that they naturally struggle with. And so, the cool thing about him is that he's honest about it, and he's not just honest, but doing something about it. And that's what I want to share. Again, without giving or revealing a name, he, is someone that has been very open about that to his congregation. He's been very open about that on podcasts and on things about like struggling with lust, struggling with like pornography and stuff. And one of the things that he's done that he told me that I've seen him actually do is that he like limits his phone use throughout the day to what some people might consider an extreme, yet it's a measure that he knows I have to take this in order to, make sure that I'm right with God. I have to take this in order to make sure that I close certain doors. And so like if I text them during the day, like between work hours, like 9 to 5, anywhere in there, if I shoot him a text, he won't reply to me. And the reason he won't reply to me is because he doesn't have his phone on him. From like 9 to 5, his wife has his phone. And so I know that his wife will see the message, she'll tell him, and then he'll get back to me later. Like I just know that already because he's been honest with me about like what the system he's set up. And that's a system that works for him. Now, as a man, you might think like, oh my God, like the level of like control that I have to give up to like, have my wife have my phone all day. Look, this is someone that's like, I struggled with this. And I don't want to struggle with it anymore. And I want to do something about it. And I pray about it. And so God's working on me, but I've also put some action behind it. Now, again, Paul isn't saying, manage it, control it. He says, put it to death. And some of y'all like have to put to death certain access to your phone. It might seem extreme to people, but guess what? At the end of the day, when you stand before the presence of God, he's not going to be like, I wonder what people said about you. No, he's going to be like, were you a good and faithful servant, right? Like he's going to ask you about you, not about other people's opinions. And so sometimes, yes, there are some drastic things we have to do. That's why Jesus said, if your hand's causing you to stumble, cut it off. That's like drastic, right? But he's like not being literal here. He's trying to prove a point to you. But like, let's take it literally. Like if you knew that your right hand was like doing something bad always, like it was always hitting people, I don't know, always slapping people, and you knew that this was going to cost you, entering the pearly gates, like a moment of suffering for eternity, right? Again, this is extreme. And you're like, oh my God, Pastor Abe, like this is way too extreme. We're talking about putting to death something that wants to kill you, something that wants to kill your love for God. So again, these are some guardrails that you can set up for love. I mean, for lust, if you struggle with that. What if you struggle with anger? There's a lot of people that struggle with anger. Well, one thing you can do is step away from environments and conversations that fuel it. If you know that you get angry every time you talk about politics, stop, getting on the forums that talk about politics. Stop following the accounts that are always posting like one side or the other. If you get angry every time that you're, around a specific group of people, then don't be around that group of people for some time. Like distance yourself from them. Put some distance between you and them, between what's fueling that. Maybe your struggle isn't anger. Maybe your struggle is greed or comparison. Well, limit what you consume that constantly makes you want more. That constantly makes you feel like you're not enough. Maybe unfollow some accounts, right? Maybe stop watching, certain programs or stop watching certain YouTube channels. Like there are practical things that we can do. Unfortunately, in the church, and I'll be very honest with you, growing up in the Hispanic church a lot, like, I love the Hispanic church. Yo soy mexicano 100%. I amo a la gente hispana, amo a mi cultura hispana. I love my culture, but I'll be very honest with you. Growing up in a Hispanic church and Hispanic environment, a lot of what's like taught is like, oh, just pray it away, it will go away. Just pray for it, it'll go away. And prayer works 100%, and you have to pray, and you should fast. Jesus said there's certain things that only come out with prayer and fasting. I believe in that. But I also believe that Jesus said, if your hand is causing you to struggle, then cut it off. I also believe in that. I also believe that there's certain things that you just need to practically restrict, that you need to practically step away from. And here's the reality. What you starve will weaken, and what you feed will grow. So if you're struggling with sin, then starve it. Because if you feel like the sin keeps coming up, it keeps coming back, and it actually is growing, and temptation is growing, then you have to step back and be honest. Am I starving it? Or have I let certain things feed it? Am I just like giving it little bits and treats here and there? Maybe you're not serving it a gourmet meal, but maybe you're like here and there, just little crumbs. So whatever you starve will die and will get weak, and whatever you feed will grow. Now, it doesn't stop there, because here's where I think a lot of people make a mistake. They think, okay, I just got to remove sin. Okay, Pastor, cool. I remove sin. There we go. I'm free. But I'll tell you, that's half the battle. Again, we're talking practical and we're talking real. So that's half the battle. Number one is like, do practical things to remove it. But number two is you don't just remove sin, you replace it. Okay? So Paul doesn't just say put to death. He also says put on. So he says put to death that which is of the world, malice, all this stuff. And then he says put on, clothe yourself with. Because the human heart cannot be empty. It's not designed to be empty. So if you only remove sin, what you cause is a vacuum. It's like attracting other stuff. It's just wanting to pull into suction something else, okay? And so if you remove sin and you don't replace it with something, that's why we keep coming back to the same thing and we create a pattern of vacuum that pulls us back into the same, sinful, cyclical cycle, for lack of a better word. The same cyclical pattern, okay, is what happens if you don't replace it with something. So you don't just stop something, you have to substitute it with something else. So let me give you some real life practical examples here. If you're struggling with lust, we were talking about lust, okay? Replace that with honoring and purity. Start praying for people instead of objectifying them. Instead of looking at a girl, looking at a man and objectifying them, pray for them. And you're like, that's weird. Yes, you have to do some weird things sometimes to defeat giants. It was weird for David to take a stone and a sling to kill a giant. Everyone expected it to be done a different way. But David knew this is the way that God has given me. And this is not in my strength, but it's by the Spirit. And so instead of objectifying them, pray for them. Train your mind to see value instead of seeing consumption. If you're dealing, again, with anger, we were talking about anger, replace that with pauses and with gentleness. Build a habit of before you respond, I take 5 to 10 seconds every single time before I say anything. I just breathe, I take 5 to 10 seconds, and then I respond, right? That's you replacing it with something. Ask what does love require of me in this moment? Like I'm angry, but what would love require of me? Like what do I need to do to love this person? Think about it before you respond. Ask, if you're struggling with greed, replace it with generosity. Instead of you like, I want. Instead of that, you be the person that gives. Find people that need, find people that are in desperate need of something. And if you have the means to do it, help them. Like you have to replace the sin with something else, with godliness, with the kingdom of God. See, this sin breaks, this pattern breaks when I replace it with what I was actually designed to walk in and to carry. But even deeper than just habits, there's something underneath all of this, underneath behavior, okay? At the root of behavior, Paul says, you have to take off your old self and you have to put on your new self. So notice this, okay? I love that this is something that is already true. It's not in the future. It is current, okay? He says, take off your old self and now put on currently your new self. And a lot of people stay stuck here because they think, well, I'm just trying to, stop being this person. But the gospel says, no, you are not that person anymore. You don't have to stop trying to be that person. You are not who you were anymore. Now you are a new creation. So when temptation comes and it arrives in my life, don't just say I shouldn't do this. Say that's not who I am anymore. This is an identity shift, a mental shift. It starts in the mind. So don't say I shouldn't do this. I'm trying not to. No, declare it with your mouth. That's not who I am anymore. So I don't do that. Do I feel that the temptation and I'm struggling with it? Sure. But that ain't who I am anymore. That doesn't sit with me. See, sin loses power when it no longer matches your identity in Christ. When the enemy knows of who you are in Christ, that's when it loses its power. So I'm going to give you a practical kind of formula system that you can do every single day. Number 1, it's starve, cut off and supply. Number 2, it's replace, put something new in its place. And number 3, it's renew, okay? Remind yourself of who you are. So remember, starve, okay? Starve. Ask, what is the godly opposite, that I'm currently doing right now? What is the thing that I'm doing right now that is opposing what God has for my life? Ask yourself that. And number 1, you need to starve it. What am I feeding? And what do I need to do to stop feeding it? You have to ask yourself practical questions. And then you have to replace it, okay? And say, okay, what can I do? What is the opposite of this sin that is godly? Let me replace it with that. Okay. And then number 3, it's renew. So ask yourself, what truth about my identity do I need to declare today? Every single day, like what is the truth that I need to declare about myself today? Because I'm constantly renewing my mind. I'm renewing who I am every single day. I am not that old person. The old me, as Paul says, has died. Now I am a new creation. Okay? So let me give you an example of how you can use this like all together. Tomorrow morning when you wake up and you're praying. You can pray and say, I am cutting off what feeds XYZ, right? I am replacing it with XYZ, and I remind myself that I am this. I am a child of God. There was I guess it's still kind of new, but an older Hillsong song that says, I am a child of God. Actually, I think it was a Bethel song. I'm no longer a slave to sin. I am a child of God. And so you need to declare that in your life. This is who I am. I'm not trying to be a child of God. I'm not like playing the part or having the mask of a child of God. This is who I am. So again, just to kind of like summarize, there's a spiritual side and there's a practical side, because guess what? You are spirit, but you're also body. And so you need to address both of them. Spiritually, you must be in the Word. You must read the Word of God to understand the heart of God. Spiritually, you must pray to God because you need to talk to Him and have conversation and community with Him. Spiritually, you need to attend church because the Word says, don't forsake the gathering of believers or the gathering of the saints where iron sharpens iron. So you need that. These are spiritual things that you can do that help you and give you grace and strengthen you. But then there's a practical side that you also need to do. It's kind of like the Christian that's like, they don't have a job and they're praying like, God, give me a job. God, send me a job. And then you ask them, how's the job search going? I'm waiting on God. Hey, brother, did you apply though? No, I'm just waiting on God. No, you need to submit some applications, right? And so with sin, a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm praying about it. I mean, can you imagine if David like stood there and was like, I'm just praying this giant disappears? The giant didn't disappear. David had to take a couple of stones, but he used one, a stone and a slingshot, and kill that giant. Now, did he pray before? I'm pretty sure he did. But when he went to go do the job, he took action. He went and he launched the stone, and that stone killed the giant. He didn't do it in his strength, okay, because the strength doesn't come from yourself. That's the spiritual part. He did it in the strength of the Lord. And I tell you today, my friend, you can do this. You can defeat this sin. You can defeat this temptation. You can get over this hurdle in the name of the Lord. That's the spiritual side, but you're going to need to put some action behind it. And I think that this is important because a lot of times we talk about just the spiritual side. I mean, we're in church, so we should talk about spiritual. But we kind of leave people empty-handed because we give them one part of the equation and we don't set them up for success for the second part of the equation. And the goal with this kind of conversation today, this podcast, is that I kind of give you both. That you understand, yes, you do need prayer, you do need fasting, you do need church, you do need a vine group. All these things, you do need to read your Bible. All these things are great, but you also need to put some action behind it. But I really believe that at the core of this, it all stems from identity. If you even if you're not saying it, if you're living a life that's like, oh, I'm trying to be a better Christian, I think at the core, that's not a bad thing to say, right? Like we're all trying to be better every day. But the reality is I'm not trying to be a better Christian. My goal is every day to just walk in who I am. My goal is not to try to be someone. No, I am a Christian. I am a disciple of Christ. I am a child of God. I'm not playing the part of a child of God because sometimes that's how we walk and act in the world. I'm not playing the part. I am a child of God. It's who I am. Now, am I trying to get better at maybe setting up some systems in my life? Sure, 100%. But I'm not trying to be a child of God. I am a child of God. That's where faith comes in, okay? I believe that. But that mentality, that has to shift in your mind. No one can do that for you. You have to do that yourself. You can't expect the pastor to do that for you or the church to do that for you. You have to declare this, and you have to walk in who you are. You're not confident in your ability. You're confident in your calling. You're confident in who has called you. And once that identity switches, then the next step is okay, let's practically set up some guardrails to continue to walk in this identity. But it all starts from the heart. Like I said, Jesus said, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if you're speaking a bunch of filth, The issue's not here. You can put some tape, but guess what? You didn't address the issue, which is the heart. So I'm trying to get you to first address the issue, which is the heart, your mind, your identity, who you are. The Hebrew writers understood that the heart was the control center of the body, right? Like, so when they said your heart, guard your heart above all else, what they're saying is like your control center, what moves you around, your identity, who you are. They weren't referring to an organ that pumps blood throughout the, circulatory system of your body. They were referring to the control center, your identity, who you are. And so I'm trying to address this, an issue of the heart. And I pray that that's what you are trying to address, an issue of the heart. Not just deleting an app, that's necessary. But before we do that, first let's address the heart. And once I've understood who I am in Christ, okay, now let's set up some guardrails so that I can continue to walk in who I am. My friend, you are a child of God. Vine Church member, or just, listener, whoever's watching this right now, you are a child of God. You have been made a new creation. Paul says, I no longer live. Now Christ lives in me. The old has passed. Everything has been made new. Christ has made you new. So walk because you've been made new. Walk in that newness of life and set up some guardrails in your life. My challenge to you this week is analyze your life and observe. Where are the areas, where are the places that you need to set some guardrails up? Where are the areas and where are the places that you need to modify, that you need to, when I say modify, I don't mean like of you, I mean like maybe of your phone. You need to modify some settings on your phone. You need to adapt some things so that you can kill the sin that you're struggling with, okay? I want you to think about that. I want you to be honest with yourself today because the Lord knows everything. And I need you to remember this, that even though he knows everything, he loved you, he loves you, he sent his son to die for you. Now he's calling you to walk in this newness of life. I pray that this was a blessing to your life. I pray that this series, above all else, has blessed your life and will continue to bless your life. Next Sunday, we're going to have a powerful, powerful word that, again, we'll just dive deeper into this. And it's going to get us, start to get us closer to the heart of kind of this series. So you don't want to miss that. Whether you're in-house or online or at one of our campuses, we're preaching this series across all our campuses. And so I'm so happy that you've tuned in this week. I pray this was a blessing to your life. And I pray that you have a powerful rest of your week. I will see you guys in the next one. God bless you.